Hi everyone, it's Joy here today, and I'm excited to share a Valentine's card with you using the Pennant Parade Valentine stamp and die. Now the products for this card are the Valentines Pennant Parade stamp and the coordinating dies. I'm also using the Heart to Heart stencil, Earl Grey sea salt and sugar cube cardstock, foam sticky circles, VersaMark ink for embossing, Fruit Punch Guava and Pink Champagne, Moon Dust Stickles and a palette knife, white and clear embossing powder, a powder tool, and white rhinestones. Now I have a piece of sea salt cardstock taped down to my Tailored Expressions grid paper with the Heart to Heart stencil adhered over top. I am using Moon Dust Stickles with a palette knife, and I'm just spreading that all over this whole heart stencil, making sure that each heart is filled with the moon dust. And I also want to make sure I do not have this too thick, so I will scrape off the excess and put that back into my container. When this is all done, I do want to set this aside to dry, and it does dry fairly quick when it is a thin layer. So when we pull this back, you're going to see this beautiful moon dust on the sea salt cardstock. Now in my MISTI, I have a piece of sugar cube cardstock, and I'm going to take each one of the Pennant Parade Valentine stamp pennants. There is 5 in total, and I'm going to put that in my MISTI, and I will be inking those up with Fruit Punch Guava and Pink Champagne. I will also ink up a few more off camera because I needed about 7 for my design on my card today. So I'm going to ink these up a few times because I want a good crisp image. Now I'm also going to leave the stamps in place on my MISTI lid because once I'm done inking with the colored ink, I'm going to come back in with VersaMark ink because I want to add some clear embossing powder onto the top of these pennants for a nice shiny look. So now that that's all done, here's the VersaMark ink, and again I left my stamps in place on the lid so they will line up perfectly with what I've already stamped on my paper. I'm going to ink that up and then just come in with some clear embossing powder and heat that until it's melted, and you'll know because it's nice and shiny. Then I'm going to use the coordinating dies. You get 3 of these dies, and as you can see there, I again stamped and embossed a few more pennants off camera, and I'm just going to run these through my die cut machine until I get all of my pennants cut out. And I'm just using a little bit of scotch removable tape to hold that in place before I run that through my die cut machine. And here you've got these great little pennants, and I'm just going to finish die cutting that off camera. Now that that's done, I have also die cut in Earl Grey, those same little, just using the pennant dies. I didn't stamp anything because I wanted to have a nice little shadow behind my pennants that are hanging there. I felt like that gave it nice, good dimension. So I'm just going to adhere them down, and as you can see, I'm just offsetting them just the tiniest bit to one side, and then you see it on the bottom. So on the left side, you see the Earl Grey cardstock, and also on the bottom. That darker gray cardstock, the Earl Grey cardstock, definitely gives it a nice shadow effect behind it. I am just using a tape runner to adhere this, but you could also use some liquid glue. Now that that's done, I'm going to come in with some foam sticky circles because I do want these to have a little bit more dimension. So I'm adding a sticky circle, and then at the top I'm adding just a little bit of tape runner. Again, you could use liquid glue because I want to be able to adhere this to my little gold string that I'm using for the pennants. I'm just kind of lining it up where I want the string, and I'm just going to push it down to adhere it to the tape runner adhesive. And once that's in place, then I will come in and take the sticky back off of this foam sticky circles, line that up, and push it down. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So again, adding foam tape, I'm just getting them right into the place that I want and then sticking it down to the string. And then I'm going to take off the foam adhesive backing and then line this up again exactly where I want all the little pennants to be, and then trim off the excess string. And then I will tape that to the back of this card panel. And I will trim off that little side piece where the pennant hangs off of the right side. So I'm just using my scotch removable tape and just holding down those little pieces on the back and then just trimming off that excess. Now I'm going to stamp the sentiments onto a piece of sea salt cardstock, which is in my MISTI. I have two sentiments. One says, "Hey cutie pie," and the other one says, "You are so sweet." I am going to stamp both of those at the same time. I'm using VersaMark ink. I am going to prep the background with my powder tool, and I'm also going to be using some white embossing powder for these sentiments. I want it to be very mild and soft because I only want the pennants to really pop off the front of this card. So here is the white embossing powder, sprinkling that on and heating it through until it's melted, and then I'm just going to trim those pieces out. Once that's done, I'm going to add a little frame of Earl Grey cardstock around each one of those sentiments. So I'm going to adhere that down and then just trim it out with my paper trimmer. And so it has a nice little gray, darker gray mat around the sea salt cardstock. So here is the last little sentiment. This one says, "You are so sweet." Again, using my paper trimmer to trim down a very small mat around that light gray sentiment. And I'm just going to adhere these directly to the card panel because the only thing I want to have dimension are the pennants, and I just think it just pops off this front of this card so beautifully. So I'm just going to have those adhered a little bit over to the left of the card, which I think also adds interest that it's not perfectly centered. I'm going to add that to a Earl Grey matte and also to a white A2 size card base. So we have an Earl Grey matte and a white matte on this card. I'm going to finish this off with some white rhinestones. I think just a little bit of that glitz and glam adds a lot to this card. And so I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid glue to adhere those in place. And now this card is done. And isn't that so fun and beautiful, and all that dimension and all of that sparkle? Thank you guys so very much for stopping by and watching. You can find all of these products at the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com.